ventilation, it sounds like a very easy topic, right? Go to the roof, cut a hole, put a fan in the window, all this stuff, right? With that being said, though, it's a lot more dynamic than what you actually think. And the fact is if we're going to operate with a true truck company, which is the goal of this organization, we need to have a better understanding of what ventilation is, and we need to have a better understanding of building construction. Now, with that being said, me standing up here teaching this class tonight does not make me a ventilation expert, doesn't make me a building construction expert, any of that. I know probably about a tenth of what I wish I knew about all this stuff. So tonight's class is going to have some information for you. I hope to generate some discussion. This is going to be interactive. It's not going to be me just up here lecturing to you. I'm not big on YouTube videos, but a lot of times it's easier for us to see somebody do it than me to stand up here and try to simulate what we're doing. I'm going to focus a lot on the commercial side of things because it's not what we go to every day, right? That's a whole new animal that really we're all getting used to. Huntsville doesn't fight a lot of them. Madison doesn't fight a lot of them. Y'all haven't had a whole lot of them in the past. Now you're getting a ton of them. We know the whole Cliff Farms and all that stuff. So just as we go through this tonight, think about your experiences that you have on the fire ground and your experiences if you've ever done construction work, you've ever done any of that stuff, and just begin in your mind to try to put the two together. Expert in this, all right? Course objectives: review and understand concept of ventilation, vertical, horizontal, positive, negative, and natural. 5 W's and how. Reviewing the structure types and how it affects ventilation. Residential, commercials, roof types, construction. As I said, the biggest deal is building types and understanding building construction. That's going to be a huge thing that's going to dictate how ventilation goes. We'll talk about some safety considerations when conducting vent. We'll talk briefly about trench cuts, and then we'll have some final thoughts on this stuff. Just real quick, going over the basics. Initiated to improve interior conditions for victims, interior personnel, and suppression efforts, reducing the risk of flashover or backdraft, right? As we talk about that, initiated to improve interior conditions for victims, interior personnel, and suppression efforts. I think one of the things that is huge, and you're going to hear me talk about it, and we've all talked about it. We hear it, 160, firefighter 1, whatever, is it's got to be a coordinated attack, right? You got to have that coordination. Truck company just can't get on scene and start venting if the engine company's not in scene, because what are we doing? We're creating that flow path. We're giving it oxygen, right? What's the average time to flash over these days? Yeah, probably on the 3 to 5 minute range, probably a little bit more, depending on the furnishings in that room and how much BTUs is being generated, right? So, on an average of 3 to 5 minutes to flash over for that room, if James is here like he is 90% of the time, and he's on the engine, right, and he's pulling up in that 3 to 4 minute range, what's getting ready to happen as we're on that scene? It's getting ready to flash, right? So, here's the predicament that we run into, right? So it's getting ready to flash, and if it hasn't flashed, what's it starving for? Oxygen. So what does that mean it is?
Oxygen to fire.
Vent limited fire, right? Yeah. Vent limited fire, okay? So you have your incipient phase where the fire starts, and then you have your growth phase, right? It gets to the peak. It consumes all the BTUs, oxygen in the room, and then it does what? All these new houses are airtight. It begins to suffocate, right? A lot of times we think it's in the decay phase. It's not in the decay phase. It's just waiting to grow and take off. It's just waiting on us to get there. Because what are we going to do? We're going to open it up, and we're going to open that door, and then we're going to go running our ass in there, and as soon as it gets enough oxygen in there, it's going to light off, right? So think about that, and I know that's kind of getting into the engine roll, but that also plays into the truck roll, right? Determining when to conduct ventilation can be a challenge for the IC, right? There's a lot of things that go into that. We'll talk about that. Coordination is critical. You're going to hear that throughout the thing. You can cut the hole. You can do every damn thing you want to. But just make sure that you don't actually push through and start venting it until you have talked with interior crews and the IC. The IC needs to be part of that too. I think a lot of times we hear it's between the suppression and the vent crews. IC needs to be part of that too, because he very well could see something going on that the interior crews or the exterior crews are not going to see. Type of building is going to play a huge role in that, and then obviously you can get on YouTube and you can watch videos all day with light smoke showing, nothing showing from the roof. There's a fire going on and they're up there and they're half dressed, they don't have their PPE on and all that stuff. You guys do this as a volunteer. You guys do this because you love the community. Don't be stupid. Go home to your family when the fire's over, okay? And go home in one piece. Don't let your ego get ahead of you. I don't care if there's nothing showing up there. You don't know what's going on underneath you, and you don't know if that roof has had water damage, and it may not even be weak from the fire going on. It could just be weak in general, and there's fire underneath that, right, and you go through. Just don't do it. Just put your PPE on. It's fine. You're not going to look like a wimp up there, okay? We got plenty of air bottles coming to the scene. Coordinated, communicated, and correct. All critical components of this that at the end of the day, if you can do these three things, it's going to be important. I think the one thing that was probably going to be the most difficult out of those three. Coordination, communication. I would say correct placement, right? We have a vent limited fire. We don't have fire pushing out the building yet. Do we always know where, big building, commercial structure, do we know where that fire actually is? So that's why I say correct. We can coordinate because we're communicating, right? The correct placement might be the difficult part, but that also goes back to the communication piece with your interior crews as well. Almost 400,000 residential fires per year, resulting in approximately 2,700 civilian fatalities annually. That number is going down. I will give the fire service credit. That number is going down. It was about pushing 5,000 about 10 to 15 years ago. So it is going down. But I think that we can all agree that we would prefer for it to be zero. That's unrealistic, but it is going down. Modern double pane energy efficient windows make it more difficult for ticks to pick up significant heat signatures compared to legacy windows. So as truck company personnel, if you're riding a seat on that, we just ordered Attack Pros the other night, so we have our tick on the truck, right? And you'll see this later in the thing. The crew leader, crew boss, whatever you want to call that for the truck company, needs to do their own 360. Unless the IC on scene is saying, hey, I need you coming off with a ladder because we've got rescues going on. That truck company officer or person in charge, whatever, forgive me, I have to break that habit here, needs to do a quick 360 themselves. That's going to give that truck company officer a lot of information that is just best seen from your own eyes. Not saying that Corey can't do a 360, not saying Tim can't do a really good 360, but as an officer, I prefer to actually put my eyes on the structure itself. So going back to the windows, we get on scene, we got some smoke showing, walking around the structure with our tick, looking in windows, and we're not seeing anything. Can that maybe lead to a sense of false security, potentially? So just think about that when we talk about size ups using ticks. Ticks are great, they're a great tool, but they're just that, they're a tool, they're not the only thing on the fire ground. On average, firefighters have 2 minutes from time of ventilation to untenable conditions without proper water application. Think about that.
Anybody notice anybody dropping water on there yet?
All right.
Open up a bunch of
They opened up a bunch of doors, and all that was in there just waiting to go, right?
There's some real.
All right, so from my understanding, up until recently, this has not been a very heavy vertical ventilation department. Is that correct? Any of the county departments, sir?
Yeah, countywide.
Just not a thing, right? So what have you typically relied on in the past? Horizontal ventilation? Okay. And I think, you know, we talk about vertical ventilation, and everybody, that's kind of the nice, cool, fun thing to do, right? Is it always the correct thing to do? Absolutely not. Does it have its place? Absolutely, it has its place. But horizontal ventilation probably is going to be what you utilize more than you're going to use the vertical. And we all know what that is. It's just basically the opening of, you know, one or more points on the exterior of the building, allowing either positive, natural, or negative pressure to escape from that. I think most of us can say we go to the front door, put a PPV van there, open one window, push it out, and go through the house and open window by window to push that smell out, right? Use this a lot for cooking fire, stuff like that, right? But let's think about this. We get a call for structure fire, or let's not even say that. We'll go with the fire alarm. Chief likes to hit on the fire alarm stuff and how we need to be ready for that 1 in 100, right? And he's not wrong on that. He's not wrong. We pull up. We got light smoke showing. Maybe we don't have any smoke showing. As a truck company, thinking about your experiences, what are you thinking? You pull up to a structure, you don't really see anything. You might see a little bit of light smoke coming from the building, but that's it. I want you to get out of the mindset of where's the fire, right? I want you to get out of the mindset of I got to go straight to the fire. I got to pull a hose line. I got to go straight to the fire. We have engine guys, and maybe you're on the engine that day. I mean, we don't know how this is going to work yet, but if you're on the truck, get out of the mindset of wondering where the fire is per se. You need to know where the fire is, but that's not your most important thing, right? So you pull up, you're looking for smoke conditions, you got your officer doing 360. Are you thinking maybe that this is bullshit, or are you thinking maybe there might be something to this? We pull up and there's no smoke showing. Does that mean that there's nothing going on in that structure? Absolutely not. Okay? Absolutely not. So, the most common type of ventilation performed anytime we open a door or window to make entry, even if it's for a fire attack, right? And I know that all of you that have been doing any type of training have had flow path beat into your brain for years, right? The past 7, 8 years, 10 years, whatever. Flow path, flow path, flow path. Door control, door control, door control. Yes, it is important to do those things because of this right here. City of Atlanta, 2016. Pretty aggressive department, busy department, fights a lot of fires, a lot of resources. Lower income neighborhood. First Duke company pulls up, they got light smoke showing from the structure. It's vacant, boarded up. They take the front door, go in and start putting the fire out. Truck company gets on scene. What do you think happens? Boarded up building, right? So what do you think they're doing? They're going around and they're ripping the plywood sheet off that building. 30 seconds later, what happens? It what? It flashes. One firefighter dead. They got him out. They knew the second engine company was pulling up almost. Second or third company pulled up and basically watched this happen. They knew exactly what was about to happen. They had a bird's eye view of it. Literally, imagine coming around the corner and watching you, just seeing it perfect, clear as day, and just not being able to do a damn thing about it. Guys in there fighting fire, right? They thought, they assumed that he had water on the seat of the fire. They didn't coordinate. You open 2 windows, I mean, nothing's there, right? You pull that board down, there's nothing there. The guy's dead. So I point that out to you because what you do on the fire ground does matter. We've all seen the things back in the day where you went around and you busted every dang window on the building and all that stuff. What you do matters. Don't get caught up in the fact that as soon as you get on scene, that ventilation is your number one priority. I'm not saying it doesn't need to be a priority, but it may not be the priority, or it may not be the priority at all on that building. So just think about that. That was not a vertical vent. That was nothing like that. That was literally an aggressive department pulling up on scene. They've probably been to that fire 100 times, right? District, rundown district, they knew what they were going to, and the firefighter's dead. Horizontal, only type possible on a multi-family, multi-story building. And I say that in the context of, if we have a fire in Cliff Farm, the Henry House, farmhouse, whatever, fires on an apartment 2 or Division 2, Division 3, is going to the roof going to do us any damn good? Absolutely not, right? So that's where it goes into horizontal ventilation is just as important as vertical, and may be more important on a lot of the structures that we have. Horizontally may be resource heavy based on area and amount of PPVs needed. So I don't have a ton of commercial experience on ventilation, but I do have some. Strip malls present a lot of unique challenges in the fact that some of them can have firewalls, some of them cannot have firewalls. What's the problem with firewalls? Almost immediately, as soon as they go up. Contractors, right? Going through, doing stuff. And I don't know how the county works, but I know in Madison, as soon as we clear a building for occupancy, I guarantee you they got cable people coming in and all that stuff drilling right through those walls. They're not going to do that before because they don't want to get caught. They're going to have to caulk it, right? Yes, there's fire caulk and all that stuff, but don't assume that. So County Line Road, probably 7 years ago, we got a call for smoke showing from a strip mall right there, kind of next to Last Resort Guns. Dentist office. It's like 7:30 at night, right? Smoke showing from a dentist office, so you're thinking, that's kind of odd, right? We get there, sure enough, it's a working fire. We weren't very good at forcible entry in this before we had our truck company, so what did we do? We bust the glass, because we don't know any better. Go in, so, we're just sitting there randomly feeding this fire oxygen, right? It's up in the ceiling, up above the drop ceiling. We finally get in there. I think it turned out to be a heater and an HVAC unit or something above that, right? Anyway, a couple strips down, heavy smoke showing. A couple of the tenants right next door were pretty much zero vis in those structures, so we had to search them and vent them. Started putting the fan in. The first one, started clearing it out. All we were doing was just feeding fire to the next building, and we just repeated that process. Finally, we ended up with 4 fans on the scene, opened up every single front door and every single back door and turned all fans on at one time, and we were able to vent the structure that way. Did any of us have any experience doing that before that night? No. We put our knowledge together and we figured out, hey, this is not working, this is what we got to do, right? So, traditional doesn't always work. You're going to be presented with some stuff that's going to throw you for a loop that you just got to adapt and overcome, right? This is what we think of the sexy stuff when we think about ventilation. Superheated gases, incomplete combustion, particles, smoke, in a structure. We're trying to get in there. Zero visibility, can't see very well. We call for the vent, hoping it opens up, right? How many here has been interior on a fire, had the truck company or whoever, engine companies do truck company work all the time, vented the structure, and just be mindful, if you're not ready for it, a vent limited fire, you pop it, you open it up, and you're not ready for it, it could very much make conditions worse. Sometimes it's going to get better, And initially, you might get that improvement in conditions, but it very well could change. So just be mindful of that. Be ready. If you punch that hole and you don't have water ready to go on the seat of the fire or in that general conditions, be ready for things to temporarily get better, and then it very well could get worse. Because all it's waiting for is a vent. And as soon as its vent is opened, it's going to start growing. Now, the advantage when you make that cut and you punch through and you got water on it, what is that fire becoming at that point? Fuel limited, right? Because you're putting the fuel out. Coordination with interior crews and ICs is critical. All right, so let's talk about this. All right, so Tim calls for vent. Why, who, what, where, when, how. Some things to think about. Where's the fire located? How big is the fire? What operations are underway right now and where are they located? And is the fire already breaching the roof? Obviously, if number 4 is there, we're probably not going to be calling for this, but just something to think about, right? Depending on who your incident commander is, they may not have a lot of experience. They could call for it and not realize it's self-vented on the backside. I'm not saying it would happen here, but if you go up north, I don't know, I haven't run enough calls, but I just know there are some people in the fire service that are eager to take that IC role, and they literally have no idea what they're doing, and they think it's the coolest job in the world, and they have no idea how much responsibility and liability they just put on themselves. I promise you think you want to be an IC on a fire? I promise you don't. You have no idea how much liability you assume every time you take that command. All right, we've already talked about that. Why, as members, truck company or engine company, what are the benefits for the task assigned? Always be thinking about, and this goes into a little bit of the truck company, but think about as the IC, if you're running that scene until somebody else gets there, what is the benefit of doing any assignment in that moment? What conditions are leading to the decision to ventilate? What are you seeing that you feel like is necessary? What are your interior crews telling you? Hey, we have heavy heat, we have zero visibility, we can't see anything. We need some relief, right? Residential versus commercial. I promise you right now, if you decide to vent on a commercial structure, vertical, it's going to take you a lot longer than you think it is ever going to, and it's going to be massively resource intensive. If you have limited resources on scene, middle of the day, morning, whatever, think about, is it the best task and is it the best utilization of my people? Purposeful movements on the fire ground maximize manpower. Just think about that. But just think about who has experience and who do you trust the most to get on that roof. Pretty good quote here, and this comes straight out of the USFRI research on ventilation. Smoke is not always an indicator of what's happening inside the structure. Given what we learned about the modern fire environment and considering typical response times for most departments, we must consider that the fire is likely in the initial decay stage and not the incipient stage when we arrive on scene. All right, so we just talked about this. The big points from this slide here of who is manpower, right? You can vertical vent most residential roofs all day long with 2 people. Could you do it with 1? Yeah. Is it safe? I would say probably not. Commercials, you're going to get into, you need at least 3 people minimum doing that. And we'll talk about roles here in a minute, but pretty much routine, if we have the manpower, 3-man minimum on a commercial structure to ventilate that if we're going to go to the roof. Access, always going to be a huge deal. Where we know we want to vent over the seat of the fire, that's pretty common knowledge. It's firefighter 1 stuff, right? Does that always mean that that's a plausible place for us to ventilate, right? It's not, and as I talked a bit about earlier, the correct placement is huge, but sometimes conditions, how long the fire's been burning, where the fire is, if it's in the attic and all that stuff, you may not be able to do that. So placement is key. Think about your access points of where you're going to access the roof. Something to consider, if you have a lot of stuff going on the alpha side of the structure, you got a lot of hose lines going on and stuff, think about maybe accessing the structure from the Charlie side of the building or the Bravo side, depending on the type of structure. Kind of get your ladders out of the way if you can. 1, that kind of helps you have a little bit cleaner working space to do your stuff. And 2, it just kind of helps keep the scene somewhat controlled and you don't have a ton of stuff just focused on one little area of the structure. Not saying you don't need to throw ladders all around it, but just maybe you want to think about where you're going to access that and what's the best placement for that. We can talk about that all day long, but every fire is going to be different. Residential is pretty straightforward. Commercial is where you're going to get into a lot of things. Commercial is going to be dependent upon roof type, structure type, fire conditions, huge part, smoke removal systems. These things are starting to go in some commercial buildings. So think about those applications and what you have there. Appliances that you can utilize. Skylights, other built-in systems. If you can ventilate the building using some type of built-in system, skylights, other holes that are already there, that's going to be much better than trying to cut a hole in those roofs. Rooftop systems present. Sorry about the typo there. Talking about HVAC systems, other types of systems that are on top of the building that could impact your ability to ventilate the structure. Be mindful anytime you're on a commercial structure, they have rooftop HVAC stuff and all that. Think about where you're making your cut and think about the load that's on that truss or between those trusses. Just think about HVAC systems, where they're located. Try to move at least 15 to 20 feet away from any type of HVAC system, something like that that's on the roof, right? Just to make sure that you're not cutting a hole and potentially weakening a building that could cause some type of collapse or something like that. You're not typically going to go through commercial stuff and all that, but you never know what's underneath. You never know what's been done to that building. So just try to be 15 to 20 feet away from any type of commercial appliance that's on top of a roof. Again, this is from the research that's going on there. Vertical ventilation should be coordinated with water application so the location of the ventilation opening will be less critical. That said, closer the opening is to the seat of the fire, the more heat and smoke will be removed once the fire transitions to a fuel-limited state, which will improve conditions for firefighters and potentially trapped occupants. Okay, I think we've already hit on this a little bit. When very dependent on what's going on the fire ground. Possible entrapment, you have to make your decision as incident commander, company officer, first on scene, whoever that person is. Am I dedicating all my resources inside to pull these people out, or am I going to try to get rid of this smoke and hope that that's going to work to save their life? I don't know that there's really a right answer on that. Just something to think about. You're going to have to look at what's presented to you, and you're going to have to make that decision. Probably most residentials, I'm going to go straight to doing search, unless I'm just really concerned about some type of flashover or backdraft or something like that. And then at that point, you're kind of up a creek anyway. Fuel-limited fire provides the most benefit with vertical ventilation. Once a TAC team is applying water to the fire, it's going to help cool the environment quickly. Ventilation-limited fires critical for all operating on the fire ground and understanding control paths. We've already talked about that. A TAC team entry point without control can help to fuel fire along with ventilation. Vertical ventilation, this is kind of surprising to me. Vertical ventilation alone, regardless of the size of opening, did not localize fire or improve interior conditions. Kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier. Now, once water is applied, or you're ready to move that fire or put water on that fire, that's when you really are going to see the difference. And as Justin was talking about, and I guess he left, you heard him say that they had zero visibility, and then they vented, and then that gave them about 3 feet of visibility from the floor, and they hit it real quick once they had that visibility. You may get some momentary benefit from venting that structure, depending on the structure. It's all going to vary. But just be mindful, if you don't have water on that fire, or at least water flowing in the structure, it could temporarily get better and then get worse again. All right, so how? Access, a big deal, right? I know we're talking about truck school. 2-story building, what ladder are we grabbing? What 2 ladders are we grabbing? Residential. 24 and then roof ladder, right? We'll talk about aerial versus a straight stick. Front and the rear of the structure, we kind of already hit on that just a little bit. Fire conditions, number of personnel, pitch of the roof, all those things are going to come into consideration of how you're going to decide to do this. All right, so residential roofs here. Not super critical to know all this stuff, but a couple things here that I would point out, right? Your hip edge here, your hips, your ridge, and your valleys. Soffits underneath here, right? A lot of fire can be burning there. Sometimes it's melted, and you can begin to put a lot of fire out by just getting under the soffits, depending on the conditions there. Generally speaking, when you're walking on a roof, where's the best places to walk on a roof? Ridges and hips, right? That's where you're typically going to have more structural stability on those edges and corners. So try to walk on those as you best can for those things. All right, single family, single story, pretty straightforward, right? Single family, multi-story, just depends. Could be straightforward, could not be. Multifamily, typical minimum of 2 levels or more most of the time. Then you have your row homes, right? What are some challenges that we face with row home fires? Spreading to the other units, and sometimes what I've noticed is, they're not typically always straight across, right? Sometimes they offset them a little bit back and forth, right? So that sometimes can create access points if you're in one trying to access the other one, because it's just depending on how it is and how they have built the firewall. Sometimes you're going to have some void spaces and gaps in there that you may not anticipate from the outside. So just think about that. Hopefully the firewalls are there, but just be mindful of that, especially if they're not traditional. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, we got some row homes right down here off the Blake bottom, right? Any other in the district that I'm not thinking about? You've heard the term, though? Yep. The thing with knee walls, and not that I have experience with them, but I have done some research on them. These are where, and we'll talk about it here in just a minute, there's a short video, but you get on scene, kind of like what Justin was talking about. You got heavy smoke showing, but you can't find the seat of the fire, right? It's not really in the attic space. You're checking the attic. You don't have fire there. You don't really see room or fire in a room on the second story, something like that. Split levels in some single story or like bonus rooms that are upstairs. Everybody lives on the bottom, but you go upstairs, you got that one single bonus room. There's a gap between the sheetrock and the roof that's kind of just basically boxed off in a way. It's just basically dead space. And there's a lot of space. They get really hot. They put out a lot of smoke, and people get confused because they can't find the seat of the fire. Imagine and I'm sure some of you have been on these fires, you're crawling around, you're trying to find it, and you can't just, where the hell is the seat of this fire, right? And you can't find it. So knee walls, we'll talk about that. That might be a different day. But the key to knee wall ventilation, if you've got crews interior, they can't find the fire, begin ventilating on the exterior of the house. Typically, a lot of knee walls are going to have 2 dormers that are going to be showing. And if you will cut in between those 2 dormers, you're probably going to have access to the fire a lot quicker than you probably think you will. All right, so looking at these pictures here just real quick, what do you think are walkable and what's not walkable? So obviously 1 through 7 is going to be easy to walk through, right? Probably don't even need a roof ladder if you absolutely don't want it. 8 through 12, depending on your comfort level on walking on a roof, you might need a roof ladder. And then 13 to 18 absolutely is going to be necessary to have that roof ladder. Most of the roofing materials that we see now are going to be the asphalt shingles, metal roofing. Something that I've noticed lately, though, and I haven't seen it on houses here, but I'm sure it's just a matter of time, is, and you might have seen them advertised, are these metal roofs that look like asphalt shingles. All right. What's the typical size vent hole that you were taught to cut? Residential. 4x4, right? Here's my rule of thumb. If you're going to cut, make it big. I mean, you can cut a 4x4, but if you can cut a 4x8 and you're going to vent a whole lot more, really, as long as you have water on that fire, is it really going to make a difference? And it's just going to help you evacuate that stuff here more. All right. So something that they do, and they've started doing in Houston, especially with the newer construction, is that the OSB and the plywood is not directly up against the ridge cap. There's a gap there. So what he talks about is not even making your top horizontal cut, just beginning with your, just doing vertical cuts.
4 foot full length of the entire sheet over.
Yep. Going down 4 feet, moving over 12 inches, and doing it again. And that kind of goes back to what Corey said. They're creating a large vent hole, but they're smaller sections, so if you need to control that flow path, you can only do it one time. Y'all want to watch that video real quick? You want to see what dicing is? All right, so you kind of get the point. You start making your things bigger, and they didn't do it exactly kind of how I would have done it. I would have still left it to where I could louver those if I wanted to. But either way, just think about that. It's a tactic. If you're going to do that when you're venting, how many rafters are you going to roll? 1, right? Well, okay, let me rephrase that. So he went 4, right? But the way he cut his, he didn't actually, he just cut straight down to where you could punch through, right? Theoretically, you would have basically right there had, well, depending on how those two look too close together, but basically you would have had two holes where you could louver, or 3 is typically what you're aiming for when you have that. So he made a little too many vertical cuts, and like Daryl said, it's plywood, so it's cutting there. But just when you have time, look it up, though. It's just another method to be able to control your flow path when you want to, without having to go back and cut more. Once you get the chainsaw running and it's running, keep it going. What I like that y'all have done with that truck is you put battery-powered stuff on there, so you don't have to worry about getting on the roof, cranking it at the bottom, getting it back up on top, and all that stuff. So the electric stuff is the way to go when it comes to vent stuff, in my opinion, but just keep that in mind. All right. So there's not a lot of stuff that's out there on cutting from the bucket or cutting from the stick. I've done it in training. I've never done it on a real fire. I can tell you just based on having both a stick and a platform at Madison, I would rather cut from the platform all day than I would the stick. The stick just doesn't allow you a whole lot of room to move or do anything of sort. So, Light Champ over here, FDNY.
Hi, I'm Mike Champo. Welcome to this segment of Training Minutes. Today we're going to go over some more tower ladder operations, primarily cutting out of the bucket. When we talk about these things, okay? 1, cutting out of the bucket. We can actually kneel in the bucket and cut while the boom operator is retracting the bucket. We can use that in slippery conditions, ice and snow. Another way to cut out of the bucket means we have 1 foot out, 1 foot in. We're going to show you the safety belts. We use the safety belt and step halfway out of the bucket, and we'll be able to cut. Another way, a third option, maybe we can use the bucket as a substantial object. We'll put the bucket down on the roof, we can have our safety belt on, and we can operate in the front of the bucket and cut backwards, and that will keep us from sliding down a high-pitched roof. In an earlier taping of Training Minutes, we went over simple saw starting. That's where the operator's going to use his knee and kneel down in the housing and start the saw. It's real good in the tower ladder bucket, right? We don't want to be up in the air starting this saw with an operator near us. We have tight quarters. Firefighter can simply kneel down in the saw and and you start to slide safely and operate. Remember, when we get a tower ladder bucket, we always want to get our safety belt on. Use the safety belt that's in the apparatus. It's real good to have retractable ones. Quick little tactical tip, especially if you have seatbelt style safety straps. Rotate your belt around or pull out your D-ring, and what you can do is you can come right through and clip on. What this does, it gives you more room to operate off the roof. You're secure. You're not going to go anywhere. God forbid we have a roof collapse, you're still secure to the bucket. With our safety belt, if you don't have a ring on it, if you're worried about the closing device, you can also go through your belt and re-clip, right? One way to do it is step off the bucket, always sound the roof with your tool, with your body, before we put our whole weight on it, right? And we can cut with 1 foot in the bucket, 1 foot out of the bucket, we can cut. We can also cut across our vertical cut, we can even transfer to the other side of the bucket. If you don't have enough reach, we'll come completely out of the bucket, and we're going to use our bucket as a support device. And we can perform our cuts anywhere we want on this roof. We won't slide off, especially in snow and ice or rain. The bucket will be our safety valve. There's one more situation here. High-pitched roof, 3rd floor, Victorian, you have heavy fire conditions. They're having a tough time getting up in the attic. You may have to vent. There is a way for a firefighter to kneel in the bucket and have the operator cut and retract as we're operating. I know it seems not a normal procedure, but it's one thing you're going to have to learn if you're operating from a tower ladder. I'm Mike Champo. Thanks for watching this segment of Training Minutes. Stay safe.
Obviously on Saturday we're going to do a lot of hands-on stuff on this. The only problem with that is the pitch on that house is not going to really challenge you to really do that. But let's talk about some things. Footing, right? Depending on the pitch of the roof, similar to working off a roof ladder. You can punch a hole through the roof with your tool. I know we got a bunch of New York hooks. I don't think we have a lot of long trash hooks here, right? Yeah. So, not a problem. Just make sure that, you're not going up there with a Halligan preferred. You're going to want a little bit longer tool if you're going to go to the roof and at the steep pitch. Honestly, I don't think that I don't think I'm ever going to be kneeling down on a bucket cutting the roof like that. I don't see that happening. I don't know that we have any, I don't want to say never, but it'd be a unique situation that you're going to do. I'm not really comfortable either with having the bucket moving while you got a saw in your hand. That's just me personally. I'm sure if you practice on it enough, you could absolutely do that. That's just something that we're going to have to work on as a department and get better in functioning with that, right? Nobody has a lot of experience doing that, no matter who you are around here. So, all right, we'll talk about knee walls, but we're getting close to 7:30, so I'm going to push through this. This is something that we can hit on another night, or you can go forward and talk about it later. Strip malls, restaurants, big boxes, church, and schools, right? What's the commonality here that we're going to face? Drop ceilings, parapet walls, large spans, potentially unsupported, right? Glass fronts. Do what? Heavy roof load, absolutely.
Ordinary construction.
Yep.
Or wood frame construction.
How about a hybrid?
Yeah.
How many buildings are actually You can't classify, if you were actually trying to classify them into one type of building construction, you could actually do it today. Not many, right? And then I heard, I was listening to a podcast yesterday, there's a new type 4 of construction now. You know, you got your heavy timber, now there's composite timber that's out there that's a completely different, you know, all this stuff. So,
Doesn't burn it melts.
literally, right? Yeah. You know, and I think as we move forward, this is something that the command staff is going to have to work with other command staffs of other organizations in the city. But, you know, and what's your definition of a big box store? Tim, when you think of big box store, what would you, right now off the top of your head, what would you call a big box store? Costco, okay. For us in the city of Madison, we have BJ's. Obviously, when Costco's there, Madison will most likely be coming to back Monrovia up on that.
I would say Dollar General is just
Dollar Generals are a whole unique animal. I mean, you can have a field day. If you want to watch some buildings burn to the ground and have a fun day, Google Dollar General fires.
It's not fun walking through one and it's full of smoke and you're like, shit.
Well, I know, that's what I'm saying, you know. I mean, it's...
But I would put Dollar General in that category.
Yes, absolutely. Do we use residential tactics on commercial structures? No. We do not. We do not. If you're on the engine and you pull up to a Dollar General, you better be going for that 2.5 most likely. I don't care if it's a regular fire or not. Don't be pulling that engine 3/4. All right, so most commercial roofs, flat roofs, obviously that is based on a lot of things, based on being able to hide the HVAC units, parapet walls, construction cost, feasibility of access for those roofs. Lot of different ways to do it, but most of your newer construction is going to be tilt-up construction on your box stores and flat roofs. Even when it doesn't look like it's a flat roof, there's a lot of places that actually are a flat roof. Who here has seen the Duluth building in Madison? Does it look like it's a flat roof? But it is. You just would never know it from looking at it. These are going to present a whole different animal, and you've got to change your way of thinking when it comes to this. It's resource intensive. We're not typically comfortable operating on commercial structures. We don't have a lot of experience doing it. So you've really got to slow down when you're on these type of fires and really think about what you're doing. That's the biggest thing. Don't get caught up, and we do it all the time. Residential fire, we pull up, we grab a line, we go. We don't think twice about it. You're going to change your mindset on commercials. So 6 common ones are built up, modified bitumen, metal roofing, single plywood, liquefied rubber, and vegetation. What's something that we're starting to see more of too? Solar panels, absolutely. That's definitely something that we're starting to see a lot more of. More on the commercial side, business districts, right? All right, so when we talk about commercial roofs that are typically a lot thicker than you would think, this here kind of gets into it, but basically you're going to have some type of layering on the top. A lot of it's that rubber coating, EDPM, whatever you want to call that stuff, coating, some type of tar. Then you're going to have some type of layer underneath that. Typically could be some type of plywood or other, could be metal decking, not typically though, it's probably going to be plywood. Then you're going to have this layer of insulation. And that layer of insulation is going to kick your tail when it comes to this. Long story short, we learned a lot on those. We went to the roof thinking that we were going to cut a roof. It was going to be really quick, and we went to the roof with a residential mindset and quickly learned, all of us, that it's not a residential roof. You have your top layer, you have your insulation, then you can have some furrings, and then you're going to get into your structural membrane. That's typically going to be, some type of metal decking on top of your truss systems, and then it's going to be built up from there, right? So just based on this right now, you get up there you get to the roof. What are you thinking?
I want to cut the top.
Take that flathead X, score that membrane, peel your membrane back, start chopping at your foam and your insulation. And sometimes there's 2 layers of it. So you can get through 1 layer and think you're done, but there's actually going to be a second layer underneath that too. And then yes, once you get to the metal decking, you can begin to make your cut. Is it always that way? No, it's not always that way. There are some more single layer type roofs. There are some wood construction. All the stuff that we're seeing commercially being built right now in Cliff Farm is going to be very similar to this construction right here. This is what you're going to encounter when you go to that. But I would say anything built in the last 15 years, you're going to encounter this. And honestly, the shopping center that we had, it had been there since the 90s, and we still encountered this. So it's not a guarantee, but definitely on your newer construction, this is what you're going to find most likely in a lot of this stuff, right? There's a lot of things that go into it, and this is all great conversation just to think about, because it definitely is different than what we're used to, right? It's not just going through some asphalt shingles and some plywood or OSB and rolling through it. So just think about that. Very labor-intensive operation. This kind of talks about, not that I don't know that we have any here, but you've seen some roofs and pictures and stuff, and y'all might have had this out in California or whatever, some gravel roofs and asphalt and all that. Oh, okay, I got you.
You're probably right there.
Yeah. So, but again, you can see multiple layers that you're having to work through. No matter, flat roof, whatever, it's the same stuff over and over, most likely that you're going to have some type of coating, some type of moisture barrier maybe under that potentially, decking, insulation, and then your final decking sitting on top of your trusses. This is your single ply here, but again, it's not much different, right? You got your membrane sitting on top of some type of other adhesive moisture barrier on top of foam insulation and all that stuff. So if it's a flat roof, you can bank on you're going to be working on about 12 to probably 16, 18 inches of depth trying to get to actually where you can punch through to get into the interior of the building.
Welcome everybody, this is Captain Friedrich with Martin County Fire Rescue Training Bureau. Today we're going to be going over vertical ventilation, specifically on commercial flat roofs. So you see here the crew is on the roof, sounding the roof, walking along the wall for extra support. Go ahead and start by using the flathead X, scoring the tar paper, trying to figure out exactly what the construction of this roof is at this point. Another member of the crew goes ahead and starts peeling up that tar paper to expose the next layer. The next layer, in this case, consisted of 2 layers of foam laid in. We go ahead and start breaking that apart to get down to the layer underneath that. This is very time consuming and not light work. Now we go ahead and get down to the 3rd layer, which is comprised of heavy metal decking, or Q deck if you will. We have the member sounding the roof for the truss to prepare for the sawyer to make his cuts properly. Now the sawyer with the K12 goes ahead and starts making his cuts.
Assuming the foam is bleeding out, which is why it's not coming up in solids.
Some of it, Tim, but some of it, I think the bottom layer is, but I'm not sure that the top layer is probably glued to the covering on top, and then I think they just typically sit on top of each other.
Bouncing over the truss system, not to cut into it. Now that we know the construction and the layering of the roof, you'll notice another crew member with the chainsaw at this point is now cutting away in order to go ahead and extend our vertical ventilation hole. We didn't use the chainsaw prior on the original part of the hole because we were not yet aware of the construction type and to avoid cutting into potential lightweight construction.
I don't think we put through the phone initially doing that call.
So now again, we've got crew members starting to take the metal deck and open the hole up while other crew members are peeling back the tar paper. So here you see a couple different methods of removing that foam. Earlier in the movie you saw us just breaking it away. On the right you see another method with a Halligan using the pick end, and then on the left, a little more unrealistic, but if you did happen to have a drill up there, you could actually undo these screws and the large washers and take the foam out completely in sheets. So now we've got it all cleaned up. The sawyer again is making his cuts. The member with the roof hook is marking the truss for the sawyer. So just as a reminder, guys, this is going to be an extremely physically taxing task that you're going to be doing up here. It's going to require all members that are on the roof to be working simultaneously, everybody tools in hand the entire time. So you see the member on the left, on the far left of your screen, is trying to defeat the spot welds that actually attach the metal decking to the top of the truss system. Those have to be defeated. Finally, remember to take the ceiling underneath, and don't forget to remove the roof decking rather than put it back into the opening you've made. Thanks for watching. If you guys have any questions.
So just tell me about ice here. Is that something that you think is going to be your go-to tactic? Right? Yeah. So it's a lot different, right? Very time-consuming. We're a resource-limited organization.
Skylights.
Yep.
Say that, and you've got roof access.
Yep. So other commercials, you got metal roofs and you got vegetation. We don't have really any of that stuff here. Kind of goes into parapet walls. Just be mindful when you're looking at these. Read your buildings, read your construction. These can have void spaces that are underneath them that can hide a lot of fire, depending on how it's built. I'm not saying always, but just be aware that there could be some void spaces that are going on between the parapet wall and the roof structure. And if that fire finds its way into that void space, it's going to run the entire building fairly quickly on that. So just be mindful of that. We could get into a whole lot of other stuff on this, but again, when you have some time on your own, look at building construction, parapet walls, and the challenges that they face. All right, scuppers, crickets, just be mindful of how they can create and the things that they can show. Be looking at where these are located on the roof. You can see here as you begin to vent. Think about those things as you're pulling up on the scene, locating it. Just something to be aware of. Where's your roof sloping to? Obviously, it's going to slope towards the drains off of the roof, right? Most of the time, this is going to be on the rear of the building, and this could be there. It could just be a straight flat roof off the rear, and your parapet's going to be on the front. But just be mindful. If you see these scupper boxes and stuff showing from the parapet, that the roof is slanting that way. Parapet walls, standard height are 30 inches, maximum 36. I've seen some more that are higher than that, for sure. Minimum 30, there's definitely not. Anyway, there's some 4-foot ones out there for sure, if not taller. 9 inches, minimum of 4. I would say that might even be a foot now, just based on store frontage and the stucco and stuff that they put on these parapet walls now too. That's going to increase the thickness of these as well. So parapets are their own challenge. Again, as you pull up, be looking for signs of structural collapse, etc. on that. Ventilation, obviously, like we kind of just briefly mentioned, actually cutting the roof is going to be your absolute last ditch resort on a commercial structure, especially on these newer ones. Now, you get an older one that's got, just a membrane on it, moisture barrier, and some plywood or something like that. That's definitely not going to be that difficult to cut. Walking on commercial roofs, try to keep your movements to the exterior walls, load-bearing walls, firewalls that come up through the ceiling or roof as much as you can. At some point, you may have to venture out to a central location of the roof or to a point where you may have smoke or something coming out with that. Depending on your roof type, inspection holes are great to cut about every, 4 to 6 feet, 8 feet, depending whatever you're comfortable with, if you're unsure where the fire is in these type buildings. The good thing about around here is, like, we don't have really any super, and I say that, is any of that commercial stuff over there east of Research Hours, like Plummer Road and all that stuff? Is it? Yeah. So, yeah, so that, I didn't even think about that, but those are going to be some older buildings that you might find with some membraned asphalt roof coatings that may only have wood decking underneath, and those are going to be where you can do your inspection hole cuts. If you can look and see what's underneath you as you're moving, do that. Who's leading the way when you're on the roof walking?
Guy in front, sounding the roof.
Your sounder, your hook guy, whoever that is, right?
Should be whoever's in charge watching the entire thing.
Absolutely. There you go, Chris. It should be the person in charge of that crew should be the one leading the way. As they get to the site, he may tell them where to cut, and then he backs up and he starts observing what's going on that roof. The two guys that are doing the hook and cutting, they're going to get tunnel vision, right? They're not going to be able to keep that situational awareness. That's why I say it's a 3-man minimum on a commercial structure, just because you're going to be looking at a whole different ball game for this kind of stuff.
We're on top of a 2-story center hallway pre-33 apartment. Let's go over how to ventilate this roof.
The ventilation crew will sound prior to stepping off the ladder and following the load-bearing wall for safety.
Place an indicator hole along your path of travel. This will allow the ventilation crew to monitor interior fire conditions.
On this style of roof, there is typically no load-bearing roof member other than ceiling joists, also known as rafters. The sounder will find your rafter and follow the work location.
An inspection cut is vital for member direction, construction type, and most importantly, safety. The sorter will cut 45 degrees to an exterior wall, rolling one member when felt. Then perform a head cut to locate the same member if felt. If that member is not felt, the construction type is perpendicular, going left to right. The center rafter louver is the cut of choice in this construction. We are going to introduce the 7L center rafter louver technique. The sorter begins by cutting with the top of the bar, finding the first rafter. The saw will then change direction, rolling one rafter and stopping at the next. The sorter will then perform a parallel cut to form a 7. A second parallel cut is next, followed by the base cut rolling one rafter. This forms the L. Let's watch our crew perform a 7L center rafter louver. Notice the foot alignment is in line with the rafters. This increases your chances of standing on a sound member and aligning your proper cut. A center rafter louver will work for almost all styles of conventional construction. Start small with a single panel and expand it if needed. Expanding the ventilation hole can be accomplished by cutting with construction. Once the initial ventilation hole is in place, extend one parallel cut. Now extend the opposite parallel cut, and finish with a base cut rolling one rafter. Let's watch this crew extend with construction. Extending with construction is typically quicker due to less cuts. Now let's
All right, so what was the biggest takeaway from that for y'all? walking the roof lines. What about the cut?
As you move along, to monitor fire conditions on the rest of the structure.
Yep. I like the 45 cut, right? It's going to help you locate those trusses underneath and figure out which way they're going. Most likely on a strip mall, you're going to have an idea of what that's doing. A large open box commercial structure, you may not be able to actually know which way your rafters are going. So I liked the fact that they did the 45. It's a good indicator of what you're working with underneath. So absolutely. Everybody know the purpose of a trench cut or a strip ventilation cut. Everybody know the purpose of it? All right, so what's the purpose of it? Stop fire, right? Yeah. The point of it, though, is you can't get ahead of the fire, or you can't get a stop on the fire, and you're basically writing off a percentage of the building and saying, look, this is where we're going to make line in the sand kind of thing. 20 to 30 feet ahead of the actual fire itself based on wind conditions. Yep. Your cuts should always work away from the fire. Anytime you're doing cuts, you should always work towards your egress point, right? So your first cut should always be closest to the fire, and then your next cut should be working away. Trench cuts work best when you have two sawyers that start in the center of the roof, work opposite of each other when possible. 3 feet minimum, 4 feet is preferred. You gotta make your decision. What's your wind conditions? What's your weather doing? At what point? How much can you cut and how quick can you cut before that fire gets to you, right? 20 feet sounds really good. It may not be beneficial to you if it's a wind-driven fire. So that's going to be an IC decision to make that decision to write off a part of the building, but you as the lead guy on the roof is going to have to determine what is the wind doing and how far and how long is it going to take me to make that cut. That's going to be a situational thing that nobody can prepare you for. You're going to have to make those decisions on your own. Typically where I see these working most of the time are going to be 2-3 story wood frame, commercial, I say commercial, multi-family dwelling, office building, stuff like that, right? You're not going to do this on a commercial flat roof cut like that, anything like that. It's going to be a office building of some sort or some type of apartment complex that you're going to do this stuff on. We can get into a whole bunch of stuff, but here's the one that I think is probably the most beneficial for you to see real quick. All right. All right, so obviously you can see that they have decided that we're not going to stop this fire right now, so we're going to make that decision. Sounding the roof, and I've tried not to beat that into your head tonight because hopefully you know to do that. You got to sound the roof, especially on these type of buildings. You've got to sound the roof. You've got to make sure on these type buildings, fire can run those attic spaces. You've all seen it. You've all been in enough fires. For the ones that haven't, when it gets in the attic, it just goes. It's like an open space, and it just runs. You've got to be sounding that roof to make sure that your stability is there. Nothing wrong with doing inspection holes to see where the fire is.
Make sure that the fire
Yeah. Hose team, have your aerial master stream in line with that to be able to drench that. Yeah, absolutely.
It's like your Alamo, that line.
Yeah. It absolutely. It's the line in the sand that this is where we're making the stop.
Absolutely. It's the Kenwood apartment building at 832 Fairview in Arcadia. And what they've done is drawn a line and come down a little bit with the camera there. And you see they're ventilating the access area or the roof area, all those hot gases to get inside the attic. And that's where they're drawing the line. They get inside the structure at one point, but they probably can't get into the units where the roof is starting to collapse. And the challenge is, when we come out with this shot, they've only got 2 wet lines to the backside of this apartment building. It's access. We've seen a lot of people running right where the firefighters are. They're just waiting, but if they start to see some more...
I don't think their trench cut worked.
They're going to start to ventilate that area of the roof as well, because then it's spread past that point. But, that's the strategy right there. Let's cut a hole in the roof, let's get all the hot gases out, and then that way we can put the fire out. But all of a sudden now, it looks like it is hot enough.
So what are they doing at this point? They're just chasing themselves, right? Why if that fire is it's close to you. Are you going to go 6 feet down and try to do another damn trench cut? I just, the point of that was to see how they worked opposite of each other and made the cut. They obviously did not anticipate that fire moving as fast as it was, and it was a poor placement on that. To Justin's point, though, you're going to have aerials in place, or you're going to have hand lines underneath it to make that line in the sand if you're going to do that. Apartment complexes, if you're going to do this, give your crews enough working space to be able to get in those apartments and enough time to get in those apartments, and begin to make that. You know, if it's me, you know, and I'm over that crew, not necessarily the trench crew, but the interior crew, I'm probably going to try to get, you know, a couple lines up there, get some attic ladders up there, and start spraying and trying to push that fire from even getting to that point where I am. But that's just me, and it's all resource dependent. 3 foot wide, 4 feet preferred, 20 feet ahead of the fire at minimum. Probably going to need to go further than that if you're going to do that. Have that one guy sounding the roof, keeping his eye on it. 2 sawyers. Make your inspection cuts. If you're working towards the fire, be making those inspection cuts on the roof. Those little notches, just to see what you got coming out of the roof. All right.
So one other thing to point out on that.
All right. So kind of wrapping up here. It's almost a little after 8. Try to get y'all out of here. Some things to look at and consider, like we've been talking about all night. Fire conditions, reading the roof. What is the roof telling you? What's the smoke telling you coming from the structure? What's your access to the roof? What's the feasibility of actually cutting the roof in a timely manner? Personnel, fatigue level. You know, it's limited resources. You got to think about, is venting that going to be the best use of my resources that I have? Access, is it ground ladders? Is it from the tower? Just in the roofs that I've been to, sometimes it's just as easy just to grab a 24 extension and throw it, and then it is trying to carry all that stuff up that tower ladder and get it all set up in the bucket and all that stuff. Sometimes it's time consuming to do that at times. So just, the tower's not always going to be the best way to get to the roof.
A lot of our houses we won't even reach.
Yeah. You might reach the front of it, but you're not going to reach the point to which you actually need to get to. And you know, let's face it, all these new modern homes have all these nice fancy pitches on them to make them look pretty and all that. They're not as easy to walk as they used to be, right? They're lightweight construction. They fail quickly. So just something to think about. Reward versus risk. Is it worth going to the roof for, based on your resources and what you hope to gain in that? I'm not saying vertical vent is not a great thing. I think it's absolutely a great thing. We typically do it a lot. We started doing it. I won't say every fire, but we go to the roof a lot at Madison now. And that's something.
I know when we don't.
Yeah. It's definitely the rarity of the thing.
Smoked out.
All right. Sounding should be done by the lead person, hook, or officer who reads the roof prior to advancement. Reading that roof before you get on it's going to be critical to you helping read it before or during the time. Traverse roof's hips, ridges, exterior walls whenever possible, and try to maintain your weight on the trusses. Once you know where the trusses are, try to stay on those as much as you can. Be mindful of dead loads on commercial roofs, HVACs, etc. Avoid cutting on the same truss where dead loads are present if possible. Avoid tunnel vision if you're the hook person. You got to keep an open mind. Full PPE. And always, as you make cuts, work away from your cuts, right? Don't be standing on your cuts. Work away from them as much as you can. If you're going to be on an attic ladder or roof ladder, try to make your top horizontal cut, then make your far cut, and then try to work back to safety. And we'll talk about some of this stuff and actual techniques on Saturday. 360s are important. Staying up on construction. Like I said, there's so many hybrid constructions out there now. Methods are changing every day. There's no way we're going to keep up with it. We scratch the surface on building construction as the fire service in general. There's some people that are better at it than us that do it on their side jobs, but overall we just really suck at it. And how fire conditions and ventilation really impact the fire ground. Selective personnel, having the right people to do the task is going to be critical for that. Coordination with your interior attacker crews and your IC. Remain defensive when you're on the roof. You know, there's videos out there of people going through and all that. There's not. The good thing is, especially, and I say good thing, nobody wants to go through the roof, but as long as you're got interior crews in there putting water on the fire, you know, the chances of you going through and critical injuries happening are slim. They're not zero, but they're slim. But there's always going to be those chances, right? Weather can and will impact your success of your ventilation. Humidity dew points is going to affect how much it lifts, how quickly it lifts, all those things. Flow paths are going to affect it. Fire blowing out of the ventilation hole means that the fire now has a good flow path without significant amount of water on it to slow it down. So everybody likes to see the fire come out the vent hole. That's great, but it just means that it's free burning right now and there's nobody putting water on that fire. So, and PPE, you know. For those that are interested, fsri.org has really good information on it that goes into a lot of the studies that have been done on fire attack, ventilation, on single-family, multi-family dwellings. They have just tons of resources. Depending on which ones you take, some of the courses are 30 minutes, some of them are an hour or so, but they're really pivotal and they really drive home some points about today's modern fire environment. Doesn't mean it's going to be relevant in 15 years, but for right now, there's really got a lot of good resources on there. It's free. You just got to sign up with an account. But I encourage you to do that. It's going to really just drive home some points and give you just a little bit more education on what you're looking for as you move forward. Again, be a student of the craft. Do your own research. Do your own study. Apply your own experiences and knowledge to it. And just be logical about it, right? Don't ever complicate the fire ground. Any questions, thoughts, ideas, concerns, conversation? All right, that's all I got for you. See you all on Saturday.